So you first, like, to get to where you are now, you first make this switch up where you're like, I don't believe in this anymore, and you're drawn to these different groups whose names are eluding me that were the initial Gnostic groups. So in your research of those groups, obviously they were being persecuted because they were going against something in the grain, but like, let's get more specific on what you were learning about them, and because it's all historical record too.
So another misconception about Christianity that I think that I probably should have brought this up is the biggest misconception. Well, actually, Danny asked me about the Bible. So this is the biggest misconception about Christianity, in my opinion, is that we think that there's a straight line from Jesus to Peter and Paul all the way to Constantine in the Orthodox Church. And there's a straight line from them, and there's no deterring, no changing of anything. There's an Orthodox line, and anything that's not on that line is heresy. Actually, in my research and talking to a lot of experts and scholars, the truth is the opposite, is that early Christianity in the 1st century and early 2nd century is complete. It's like a big bang. It's an explosion of ideas.
Yes.
There is no orthodoxy early on.
And they were also underground.
Yeah, they weren't a legal religion.
Persecuted.
Yeah, they weren't a legal religion per se. The persecution thing is we can get into that. It gets over. I think it gets over emphasized of how much they were persecuted. They did get persecuted under Diocletian. That's in the 4th century. That's way later. The first couple centuries, there's not a lot going on as far as like Christians being singled out. There is obviously the rumor that Nero blamed them for the fire, but whatever. That's a whole other thing.
Yeah, whatever.
But
burn a few.
The misconception I was getting at was, instead of seeing a straight line and then like people deterring from that straight line over time, what you see is chaos in the beginning. The 1st century, there's all these different groups of Christianity. There's the Carpocratians out in Alexandria, and they believe that Jesus was like another prophet, like another philosopher prophet, like Pythagoras and Plato and Aristotle. They put him
just prophet.
They put him. Yeah, they put him. Well, they do think he attained salvation. They think he attained apotheosis.
Apotheosis,
which means like becoming God from a man to God.
Got it.
They believe that doctrine called apotheosis, but here's the thing: they think anyone can get that. The Carpocratians. This is a late 1st century, early 2nd century Christian group in Alexandria, Egypt, who believe that anybody who through gnosis can attain godhood. Jesus was one of them. They use Jesus as the prime example of how to do it.
So they think he found God within himself.
Yes.
Okay.
And they also deified another person. So Carpocrates had a son. Carpocrates is the leader of the group. He had a son named Epiphanes. And Epiphanes was this like wonder child kid who was only 17 years old when he died. But in his early teens, he was writing books and philosophical treatises. This kid was a genius, and they deified him. We actually have a record in the sources from the Christians that we actually know where it was and what year it was. It was 117 AD, I think it was, and on the island of Kefalonia in Greece. And they built a temple to this person as another Christian god. Whoa. So you have in their theology you have
Christian god.
Yes, in their theology they thought that Pythagoras attained godhood through gnosis. Plato also attained godhood through gnosis. Aristotle attained godhood through gnosis. Jesus attained godhood through gnosis, and then this Epiphanius character.
But why were they calling themselves Christians when there's multiple that they seem to put on at least similar level? Because,
well, like I said, Jesus is like their main figure. He's the example of the most recent, in their opinion. They're still Christians. They still follow Jesus. They still follow his teachings. In fact, the Carpocratians followed him more than anyone else, in my opinion. They took everything he said so seriously. For example, there's passages where Jesus tells his followers, if you don't leave your family and you don't leave your children and your brother and your sister to follow me, then you're not an apostle.
Hey guys, if you haven't already subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. It's a huge, huge help. Thank you.
Yeah.
He said that?
Jesus, yeah. We can look up the verse, actually.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, because that would be good for context.
You can pull up that.
Yeah, pull up the Jesus.
Alex had us pulling
Jesus
up.
telling his disciples to leave their family, and then it should come up.
Alex had us pulling up so many goddamn verses.
Yeah.
Let's pull up verse 11, 12, Mark.
There it is, Luke 14.
500.
So, okay, the many people who were traveling with Jesus, he said to them, if you come to me but will not leave your family, you cannot be my follower. You must love me more than your father, mother, wife, children, brothers, and sisters, even more than your own life.
Whoa.
And so the Carpocratians took this to heart. They
And
believe.
this is in one of the Gospels.
That's in Luke.
In Luke.
Yeah.
Is this in the other Gospels?
Well, his attitude is very similar in the other Gospels. I don't think it's contradictory to the other Gospels. His attitude was, follow me above all else. That's very. And the Carpocratians actually, their doctrine was drop out of society and join the Carpocratian sect and become a new family member. You become born again as a new family member. You leave your family aside. If you can't leave your family, if you can't sell all your property, they would say to become a Carpocratian Christian, you had to sell all of your property and give it to the church and come here with nothing. So if you were a wealthy aristocrat, you were expected to sell your property, give it to the church, and become a nobody.
That's not crazy dissimilar to priesthood today in the Catholic Church. It's not quite this, but you understand what I mean, right?
And there's a passage in Acts where the Ananias and his wife, they sold their property, but they kept some of the money, and they didn't tell anybody. They sold most of their property and gave most of the money to Peter, but they kept a little bit just for themselves. Just to, we need a little bit, and they die for that. Jesus kills them for this. It's in Acts. He kills them. He kills them because they kept. Actually,
can we pull that up?
Peter sort of does it through. Peter sort of kills them, but it's through.
Wait. Are you saying kills as like literally
they
stabs
literally
them in the heart?
No. They just
he like
just
crushes
die.
them.
They just die like instantly, smote.
All right.
Yeah, look this up.
Acts
It's been a while
passage about selling property and keeping back money, specifically Acts 5 verses 1 to 10, describes Ananias and Sapphira selling a property and lying to the apostles by claiming to give the entire proceeds while secretly keeping some for themselves. Their deception is revealed, and they both die as a result. The incident contrasts with the early church's practice of sharing possessions.
Yes.
But how do they die? They just like
it doesn't say. They just stop breathing. They're just done. So
that's one way to do it.
Yeah, but here's the thing about the reason why I brought this up for the Carpocratians. The Carpocratians were very communistic.
Communistic.
Yeah, you joined the Carpocratian church by selling your possessions, giving all the money away, and then you become equal among the rest of them. Right. So that means you get the same food rations every day. You work the same as everyone else. You contribute the same as everyone else.
It's a tribe.
This is how they operated.
Yeah,
and so they're following what they believe to be Jesus's teachings, which I don't think you can argue that they weren't.
Alessi, were you familiar with this passage in Acts?
Yeah. Totally.
How do they teach this in the Christian church?
The way they teach it to us is essentially Jesus or God at this point, because Acts, he's no longer around. But essentially, I think he's talking to Apostle Paul, right?
Yeah, Peter.
Yeah. So essentially what's happening is he's like, all right, you guys are in charge of the money, kind of like a Judas situation where like you're going to control, make sure that it's handed out and evenly distributed. And it's showing the selfish desire where, all right, I want to keep some protection, so I don't have my full faith in this.
Exactly.
Because I'm going to hold on to some of it because I just need a little bit. I don't need a lot. And I'm going to take that little bit and just hold on to it. No one has to know about it. And then it's like, we know you hit it. Boom, dead. Gone.
Yeah, but what's how do they teach the dead part? Because that sounds like someone whacked them.
Or just
it's basically
just like you're dead, gone.
God just struck them.
Yeah. Struck and they fall down immediately. Dead.
Yeah, it's just completely like just done, like no longer active.
It's gone.
Yeah, turned off. But like you said, it's about faith. Are you fully in this, or are you just halfway in this? Are you 3/4 in this? And it's about being fully in this. And the Carpocratians believe that if you're not fully in this, don't come here. If you're not going to sell all your property, don't come here. That was their doctrine. And they're a very interesting group. And actually, they last a lot longer than most of the other Gnostic groups do. They were believe it or not, people don't know this. People think like Christianity was like underground and completely illegal all the way until Constantine. It's not necessarily true.
That was like 313-ish, something like that.
Yeah. And but there was times where Christianity was out in the open in the cities, in the urban areas, and no one, just because it wasn't legalized as a Roman imperial cult religion, doesn't mean it was being persecuted or people were being attacked for being Christians. For example, during during the Severan dynasty, so the early 3rd century, 200s AD, early 200s AD, the Severans were very welcoming to Christians. They even minted coins in Syria and in the Eastern realms with Noah's Ark on it, images of Noah's Ark from the Bible. This is for
Well, that could mean a lot of things because Noah's Ark technically was in a lot of different ancient texts. Was that basically
no,
like
but
the back
not
door?
Not Noah, because the other versions have different names.
They have different names.
It was like
Okay, that's right. That's right.
Kisithro was in one of them.
I forget.
Yeah,
Chem was one of the
Deucalion is the Greek one. So they could have, if this is in Greek, this is in a Greek place, they could have wrote Deucalion on there to go with the Greek legends that people were, but they went with Noah because there was Christians living in these places.
Interesting.
And not only that, one of the empresses, the most famous or the most powerful woman in the Roman Empire at the time was Julia Mamaea, the sister of Julia Mesa, or the sister of Julia Domna. She was a pagan and a Pythagorean. Her sister, Julia Mamaea, who was the mother of Alexander Severus, the last of the Severan dynasty, young 17-year-old emperor, she was the mother. So she was really in charge of the Roman Empire. She was a Christian. The empress.
We know this.
Well, it's a little bit debated, but most scholars think she was a Christian.
Oh,
Her sarcophagus has Christian on it. The sources say she was tutored by Origen. She was being tutored by Origen, and she's the Roman empress.
By Origen?
Yeah, you can look up Julia Mamaea, Mamae, Julia Mamaea. Yeah, that's her.
And let's see. So she was born 180 AD, died 235 AD.
And and a lot of the sources from and Eusebius, I think it's Eusebius that says she was tutored by Origen, but that she's like considered to be one of the earliest Christian noblewomen who like really helped out the Christians and even into the Diocletian persecutions in the 4th century, there were Christians high up in society in aristocratic positions. They weren't just like these lowly, completely on the bottom.
Yeah.
Like they were high up in society by the time they get to the 4th century. That's why the persecutions happened. They were kind of becoming a threat to some issues in the empire. Diocletian was trying to reason with them and trying to say, look, just don't get in the way of our sacrifices and our sacred games, and we'll leave you alone. We want you to be part of our empire. But for some reason, they just kept getting in the way of things. They kept taking down statues. They kept desecrating statues. They kept desecrating temples, getting in the way. So he ended up banning the Eucharist, which is a huge persecution. There is truth to their persecutions, and there was Christians that got pulled out of their houses and killed during this 10-year period from 303 to 313. That's when Christianity can say for sure during 303 to 313 that they were like 303 to 311. I think the persecutions were lifted in 311. Actually,
is there a popularized name for that time period? Like the Great Persecution?
Yeah,
that's what it's
called. Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
So that's the time where Christianity is actually persecuted. Before that, there's nothing close. There was
meaning there could have been persecutions here and there, but nothing
little
on
tiny
a mass scale.
Yeah, like Decius in the year 249, he issued an edict basically saying Christians have to like take part in everyday Roman activities, and they can't be outcast. And like that didn't get in, according to the sources, that barely even got enforced. It was just like an edict on paper, just to like make some people happy. And then it wasn't really enforced. There wasn't people getting fed to lions like there was in the 4th century. Okay. Anyways.
So we covered the one group. How do you say it again?
To say all that, to say the Carpocratians believed in this idea of giving up everything, giving your all, being 100% in line and selling your property. Now, there are other groups from that period. Valentinians are one.
Okay.
And
what was their story?
Valentinus was, believe it or not, Valentinus was a Pythagorean Christian. So the way I describe that is he believed in the philosophy of Pythagoras, but he also believed that Jesus was the Messiah and divine. He wasn't just he believed Jesus was a god, like a divine figure.
To get specific, when you say the philosophy of Pythagoras, I'm not just thinking the line on the fucking triangle here. What are we saying?
They believed in what was called the triad, the divine triad, which was there's a father god on top of everything who's either called the nous, which means mind in Greek, the mind of the cosmos, completely incorporeal, completely spiritual, doesn't have a flesh body, is perfect in all ways, doesn't have need for anything. But this monad figure, this father figure, creates from himself a logos or a son who's the heir. But Philo of Alexandria was a Jewish writer in Alexandria from the 1st century. I think he was born in 20 BC and he died in like 50 AD. And he also was a Middle Platonist, they call it. And he also believed that the God of the Old Testament, Yahweh, was going to give up the kingdom of heaven to an heir called the Logos. This is what you find in the Gospel of John. But the Valentinians also seem to be borrowing from Philo, but also Pythagoras and Plato and the Greek philosophy. So they believed that Jesus was this Logos figure, and their central gospel was John. So the Valentinians didn't read Luke, they didn't read Matthew, they didn't read Mark. They only cared about John. They thought John was the only gospel.
What makes them? That seems so arbitrary to me.
Well, that's how early Christianity was. The idea of having all 4 gospels together, sort of develops over time. And I would say the end of the 1st century, when the gospels are being written, to the middle of the 2nd century, it was more common that certain groups had certain gospels. And then probably towards the end of the 2nd, 3rd, and early 3rd century, that's when people start putting these gospels together and trying to unify them and trying to make them all have one message.
Well, you mentioned earlier, you gave the example of the one Bible, that the St. John's Bible, specific one that the one church adhered to.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't adhere to any others, but there's a greater point obviously to be made here, which is that when you go to pull up a verse across whatever fucking 50, 60 English translations there are of this, you can, one word can be here in the sentence instead of here, or there instead of there, and it can totally change the meaning. And now you're talking about a book of thousands and thousands of words,
right,
where the context can be changed. And now the next layer to that is, 4 gospels where they're telling roughly the same story.
Roughly the same.
But they're doing it in different ways.
And they have different ways of telling it, and they have little bit of tweaks here and there. Yeah.
That's always been so confusing.
And there are some contradictions that are not even up for debate. Like, for example, in Luke's gospel, Jesus is born during the census. What's the guy? The census.
Herod?
Quirinius.
Oh.
And if you look at the primary sources about when he was the governor, it was around 7 AD when that census would have taken place, according to Josephus, which is the major source for that time period. Well, okay, so that means Jesus was born in 7 AD, 7 years after Jesus is born 7 years after Jesus. Weird, right? But in Matthew's gospel, he's born at the end of Herod's reign, because the massacre of the innocents. Herod dies in 4 BC. So in one gospel, Jesus is born 4 years before Christ. And in another gospel, he's born 7 years after Christ. So there's a little bit, whatever. There's just 2 people thought, maybe they both thought different things.
Maybe the answer's in the middle.
Maybe the answer's in the middle. Maybe that's why, maybe, who knows? Anyways, I don't know why I got to that. But back to Valentinus. Valentinus had this he's very Gnostic. He believed in the doctrine of gnosis, attaining gnosis, learning the secret doctrines, gnosis over pistis, which is faith, and there's chosen people who have the spirit that can learn the divine nature of God and become deified, all that stuff. Valentinians believe that stuff. Now, when you hear about this right now, this sounds completely heretical than Orthodox Christianity. The idea of Pythagoras being a part of the tradition, that's nonsense. But in Rome, in 136 AD, Valentinus was running for Bishop of Rome, which is the Pope. Valentinus was the 2nd highest amount of votes.
Is this still underground, kind of?
Yeah, but the Christianity is not legalized.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
But they're out in the open in this time period. They're
so he's putting
chilling.
Flyers out. I'm running.
Yeah, they're
for Bishop?
chilling with among the Romans in the 2nd century.
We have evidence of that.
Oh yeah. Now they're not huge. They're only 5% of the empire,
right?
At the most.
But that's still something. This is the biggest empire in the world.
There's a lot of Christians in the 2nd century.
Yeah,
there's a lot of evidence for Christianity, and they're not being chased down. They're not being fed to lions in the 2nd century. That didn't happen, until the Diocletian persecution. That then did happen.
Right.
Obviously, the story about Ignatius. I don't know how people debate on how true that is.
What's the story there?
He got fed to lions, or another source says he was burned alive.
Something bad.
And that's in like early 2nd century, something like that.
And what did he do? Just being Christian?
Just being Christian, yeah.
Was loud
There's
and
a lot
proud
of
about
scholars.
it?
There's a lot of scholars that doubt that this is accurate. There's some scholars who think the truth's in the middle. That maybe he was, maybe he was executed. Maybe he did something.
And what's their basis for saying it wouldn't happen? Is there a written record that says, "Oh no, he actually lived to a different year" or something like that than we thought?
That's a good question. I do think there was with Ignatius. I do think there is something like that going on. I can't remember the top of my head, but I remember someone telling me that there was some contradicting evidence about his story that didn't make sense. But I wish I knew that on the top of my head. But anyways, I'm just pointing out that there is sources about persecutions. I'm not like ignoring those.
Right.
But like to the extent that for 300 plus years, Christianity was like hiding in the corners because they're going to get killed if they got found out. It's just not true.
Real quick, as a tangent, I always forget this. How did it end up that the church made its way to Rome? Like, it was through Peter, right?
That's the story of the church.
Yeah, and obviously Rome is the capital of the ancient Roman Empire. I understand that, but these guys were in Israel and Syria.
Yeah.
And then he just settles on, I mean, maybe the cannolis were good, but what was the story there?
Well, I actually did a whole video. I did a long 4.5-hour documentary on this exact subject of how the hell.
Let's do 4.5 minutes.
No, I'll just to kind of like answer that, because I do want to get back to Valentinus for an
I'm keeping
important part. No, this is a good question though. How does someone like Valentinus end up in Rome running for bishop of Christianity when this is a Jewish religion? And this is only in 136 AD. That's early.
Jewish.
The Gospels are just finished at that point. The Gospel. So Mark, some people think Mark is written around 70, maybe 75, and then Matthew 85 to 95, and then Luke and John is 2nd century, 100s. And all of a sudden in 138 or 136, you had this election going on in Rome for the bishop of Rome, right? Well, how does that happen? I think so. I look at other religions that were going on in the Levant, and there's Phoenician religion, there's a Syrian religion of Elagabalus, and the worship of Molech Baal, and the worship of a god named Dusharis, who's an Arabian god, and they all have temples in Rome in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th century, until Christianity kind of bans all these cults. Rome, for whatever reason, was like this. It's like New York City. When you come to New York City, you have Chinatown, you have the Arabs over here, and they're all from different places. They all come to New York City to like sort of like make it for themselves. Rome was like this too.
It's still like that in some ways. Yeah.
Rome was the place where different cults from different parts of the Roman Empire, like I mentioned, Syria, Elagabalus gets his own cult in Rome. Arabian Dusharis, there's a temple in Puleo in Italy that they found. So people were coming from other parts to go to Rome to set up shop, to spread their message. And I think Christianity is doing the same thing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Christianity, and I do think maybe let's go with the story. Peter really did bring Christianity to Rome. Maybe that's true. I actually think when Peter got to Rome, there was already an existing group of people that were Jewish, Greek-speaking, maybe Latin-speaking people who were already open to the idea of getting away from the temple and bringing something that's more worldly to Rome. And Christianity fits that perfectly. So I think there were people who were
God. It had a hero kind of thing.
Yeah, like a hero, like a G, like it's very Greco-Roman in the sense of the mechanics behind it, where you have like in Greco-Roman religion, oftentimes the Platonist who believed in the perfect one God, you don't pray to that God, you pray through a daimon. So you pray through Aphrodite, you pray through Dionysus or Apollo or one of these lesser gods to get to the one.
They get the message.
So Jesus fits that role in the Greco-Roman sense, where he's the mediator between you and God.
Right.
So you can see how this would take off in Rome. It makes perfect sense to me. Valentinus, though, just to go back to him, the reason why I brought him up.
At the weave. I don't even have to do it. You're good.
The reason why I brought him up is because when the writers like Hippolytus and Irenaeus, who are writing about him 4 or 5 decades later, calling him a heretic, are not explaining, if he's such a heretic, why was he in Rome? Why was he the second most popular person to become Bishop of Rome? Which, if you pull any Catholic Bible out, and almost every Catholic Bible has the list of popes on there, starting with Peter, going all the way to today. If he would have got a few more votes, this heretic, Gnostic, would have been on the list of popes to this very day. And he lost by, like, according to a bunch of sources, not just the people who call him a heretic, Irenaeus and Hippolytus both say he lost by a slim vote to Anicetus, I think his name was. Anicetus, I think his name was. But anyways, whoever the pope that got elected in 136, that was the one who won that election, and the sources say he built a bunch of churches in Rome during his tenure. But that would have been Valentinus, and who knows? I mean, there's a lot of people who say that the Bishop of Rome at that time didn't have a lot of power compared to the Pope today. It's true. But the sources also do. There's a book called the Liber Pontificalis. The book, in Latin, it means Book of Popes.
Okay.
And that book, you can see the early popes from Peter all the way to this Anicetus figure. I think there's 10 popes in between Peter and in the year 136. So Valentinus would have been the 10th pope on the list if he would have won this. Well, who knows if he would have gotten that position. He lives until the year 180, Valentinus. So he was only 36 years old. He was born in the year 100. He would have been 36 years old, 50 more years of his life as the Bishop of Rome. So I think he could have took the church in a different direction.
Sure.
I think instead of having this idea of there's a straight line and they're following the doctrines perfectly from Jesus to Paul and to Constantine, I think if anything, the church is like a ship that goes in different directions based on who's leading the ship. And the doctrine of selling all your possessions, that's not a part of Christianity anymore. That's not like a requirement.
Yeah.
The Carpocratians thought that was necessary. They're reading the Gospels. The Valentinians are reading John, and they're getting their doctrines from John. So the idea of Logos and Zoe and the Triad. And by the way, the Trinity wasn't even a doctrine early on. That's
the Holy Trinity.
The Trinity becomes a doctrine at the end of the 3rd century, early 4th century.
And what was
the Nicene Creed establishes the Trinity. So that wasn't even an official doctrine until the Nicene Creed. But
at the Council of Nicaea, you're saying.
But guess what? The opposition to the Trinity, which was Arius, Bishop Arius, the Arianism, he calls the Nicene Trinitarians, he calls them Valentinians as a diss. Because Valentinus is now a heretic at this time. But the Valentinians believes in a Trinity. The earliest Trinity on the Christian record is the Valentinian Triad.
And what was
it's
it
the
different?
Same word in Greek.
Was it different from the Trinity we know
It's different,
now?
yes.
So
instead of having a God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, they have God the Father, Son, and Zoe. Zoe was this female aspect.
Can't have that.
Yes, they cut that out. They went strictly male.
No females.
Yeah.
This is a
But
sausage factory only.
they do incorporate the Mother Mary aspect of the divine feminine in that sense. But Mary gets venerated with icons. So they still keep some of that stuff. But anyways, Valentinus was a heretic for believing in the Trinity. That's the same word, trios in Greek. It means triad. But it also is the same Greek word that we get the word Trinity from. So they're using the same word, trios, for Trinity. The Valentinians believed this, but they were heretics when they believed in it. But then later on, in the 4th century, it becomes doctrinal. So the Valentinians did influence the way the church goes, even if everyone thinks they're heretics.
So you looked at them as kind of an ignored part of history when you're looking at the church.
Yeah, and the fact that he was so high up in the church, being in Rome,
he was a real guy,
running for bishop, tells you that he was taken seriously, that his ideas were seriously. He wasn't a heretic. He wasn't a joke. There's another figure named Marcian, same time period, middle of the 2nd century.
Is this going to be another type of Gnostic religion too?
Marcianism.
Okay.
This character, some people think, well, let me tell you this actually. In Luke Acts, it talks about there being 70 disciples of Jesus that were chosen by Jesus.
70.
Yeah. There's the 12 apostles, and then there's the 70 disciples.
12's a nicer number.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. So the 70 are this group of people. They're not named in Luke Acts, but the church tradition names them. So they have records of who these 70 people were. One of them was a man named Philologus, who was the first bishop on record of Sinope, which was a city in the Pontic region of Asia Minor, modern-day Turkey.
Okay.
So Black Sea coast. And he was the first bishop of this city, and he's listed, according to church tradition, both Orthodox and Catholics believe that he was the father of a heretic named Marcian.
Here we go.
So this guy Marcian is literally the son of one of Jesus' chosen 70 disciples. And you think, so here's where things get crazy. There are scholars who think he's the first one to have Paul's epistles, that he was a disciple of Paul, and that he wrote the Gospels.
The father, not Marcian.
No, Marcian.
Oh, Marcian.
And maybe he got it from his father, maybe. I don't know. I never even explored that.
Okay.
His father must have known Paul, right? He's from the first century.
One of the 70.
If this is true, what the church is saying, he definitely knows Paul. And how does Marcian wind up with the 7? So there's scholars who think that there are 7 authentic epistles of Paul. Some people challenge this. Nina Livesey thinks there's none. She thinks they're all forgeries. We can get into that later. Anyways.
We're gonna.
Yeah. So these 7 authentic letters of Paul, Marcian happened to have in his Bible called the Evangelia. And in that gospel, in his Bible, he has Luke, he has the Gospel of Luke, and I think the book of Acts, well, like half of the book of Acts, and then 7 authentic epistles of Paul. That was his Bible. He's the first Christian on record to have a full Bible. Because remember I told you earlier, in the early Christianity, it was likely you would go to a church and they might have one letter of Paul. Maybe you're in Corinth.
Right.
Let's say you're in Corinth.
So they got the Corinthians.
They got the letter to the Corinthians there.
Yeah.
And they probably might have Matthew. Or maybe the Matthew and Luke. Maybe they have 2. Depends on where you are. But the idea of having all these texts into one book comes later. Marcian, this heretic, this Gnostic, has the first compilation of what's called a Bible. He's the first person to put this together. And his ideas are strange too, because he believed in the Old Testament there's 2 gods. One of them is the father of Jesus, who does all these great things. He gives the laws to Moses. That's the good God. But then throughout the text, he says there's parts of the Bible where there's a second God. Now, there's actually some truth to this, because in Leviticus 16...
Is this going where I think it's going?
With the demiurge thing?
No, keep going.
Okay.
That's not what I'm thinking.
In Leviticus 16:11, I think is the verse, there's this idea of a scapegoat called Azazel in Hebrew.
Mm-hmm.
And you offer... The way it works is the Israelites would offer a scapegoat and let him off in the wilderness, and that was dedicated to the god Azazel. And the other god was slaughtered for the sins, and this is during Yom Kippur, was for Yahweh. So there was 2 gods, an evil god and the good god.
That's what I was going to get at.
And
Is that Satan?
Satan is Azazel.
Okay.
They all get lumped together in the
That's
same.
what I thought.
Christians do think Azazel is Satan.
Okay.
The Jews think it's different. The Jews think Azazel is a different thing. Satan is not the same as Azazel. They have different purposes. Satan is more like a district attorney figure, like in Job. Yeah, in Job, he's friends with God. In the book of Job, Satan's friends with God. He's like, hey, what's going on with your buddy Job?
30 years to life?
Yeah.
All right, sounds good.
Exactly. So anyways, but yeah, later on, the Christians will lump it all together as one evil entity. But Marcian's going through the Old Testament. And for example, he gives an example of the part where Elijah gets called Baldy by these little kids, and Elijah curses them and sends she-bears to maul these kids and eat them.
She-bears.
Yes. This is in the book of Kings. And they kill the kids and eat them, and he just keeps going. So Marcian, who's, he's influenced by Platonism and the idea that the one is perfect, that God would not murder anyone in these circumstances. He's driven by this dogma. So his way around it is that's the evil God. That's this other God. One of the evil. So every time in the Old Testament where something happens where God looks,
he blames it on
the other God. So Marcian believed that the Jews who reject Jesus were following this other God, and that following Jesus is following the good God.
Oh, so he's like the original Kanye.
Yeah,
right.
But he was a heretic, and you could see why. This is not doctrinal church stuff. But what's so fascinating about Marcian is how much we can look at him and talk about his ideas being weird and strange. His father is one of the 70 disciples, and he's the first Christian on record to have a Bible with Paul's epistles in it.
Yeah, I want to go back to this.
So he had to have been important.
I stuck a pin in this when you were saying it.
Yeah.
But the 70 versus 12, what's the history there of how we landed on these?
So it's not a contradiction. There's 12 core apostles. You know, the 12 core.
So
that's just the inner circle of Jesus.
Right.
Then there's 70 on the outside circle.
So you've got like the major leagues and then like the AAA team.
You got the AAA team, yeah. And so Marcian's father would have been one of these.
So one of the AAA guys got access to like some of the most important scripts?
He's one of the 82 major.
I know, but I feel like that would be among the 12, right?
You would think. But what's interesting about
Maybe
that?
It leaked.
What's interesting about that is there is no Peter. Like there's the letters of Peter. A lot of scholars think that's written later.
Why do they think that was written later?
There's textual criticism reasons for it. They go through it. They comb through the text, and there's reasons why. I'm not really sure. I'm not going to even.
That's a good answer.
Yeah, because I don't know.
There's so much here you can't know everything.
I don't know why they think Peter is forged, but they do. A lot of scholars do. Obviously, Christians don't, so they might be right. Maybe this Peter's letters, but there's no like evidence. So Eusebius does say that when Mark got written, Mark was written by Mark, obviously, in Alexandria, with Peter telling him what to write. So,
like sitting with him.
According to Eusebius, the Gospel of Mark is Peter's Gospel. According to Eusebius.
On what evidence does Eusebius base that?
He just says it.
He just says
and
it.
He's and the reason why it's so doubted is because he's the first person to say this in almost 300 years have gone by.
Like, did he talk with him? No.
No. So Eusebius is living in the 4th century. He's living in the time of Constantine. And he's just kind of saying shit. He's just kind of going, Peter gave us Mark, basically. But yeah, then you have...
Then it becomes... But you see how wild that is? Then that becomes like a record. Like, Eusebius, real straight shooter.
Yeah.
This is what he said.
Yeah, he said a lot of stuff like that. He made, like... Eusebius had a lot of weird stories like that.
Like, could you imagine me being like right now, like, I know... Old Georgie Washington and Paul Revere, they were sipping some ale in 71. It was at Frank's Tavern. Yeah. I know this. It happened. Just trust me. And now, like,
just outright saying
yes,
it. That's right. How Eusebius operated. He was very much like that. What was I going to say? Eusebius gets like people think that he forged a bunch of stuff. That he's the one who wrote Josephus's Testimonium Flavianum, which is the passage in Josephus that mentions Jesus. People think that's forged. I don't think it's forged. Most scholars think...
Meaning like he wrote it in?
He completely wrote it in. The whole thing was fake. And the reason why they say this is because Origen, who's living a century, 2 centuries before this, talks about Josephus, but doesn't mention this passage, which is odd. You would talk about Josephus, but not mention a passage that mentions Jesus. It is a very good argument. I'm not going to lie. But the experts... I'm just going to go off what the experts say here. Steve Mason is like a authority on Josephus stuff. He thinks that passage is legit, but it was heavily edited later on. So he thinks that Josephus did write about Jesus, but the version we have right now in all of our versions is all completely edited and interpolated, he says. So basically, they edited it to make Jesus, because it's a very odd passage.
Is he basing that? This might be a dumb question, but is he basing that on whatever the original record of it was? Meaning, like, he can look at the original record and say, like, in modern day terms, oh, they whited that out right there. Here's how I know that.
No, because the oldest manuscripts from the Josephus are like after the 5th century anyway. So you're going through manuscripts that are already after the supposed interpolation already happened. There's no, we don't have any physical fragments of Josephus that go before Eusebius. So it's possible that he did do this, but I think it's still speculation. But I forgot where we were on that.
Actually, there's an important point here, and maybe this will lead to some new topics as well. But, I think about this all the time, and this relates to every religion, every ancient text, whatever it was. You and I... We're talking about this off camera before we started. It's like when we look at time, right? We're in 2025 right now. When we look at the 1960s, that seems like a long time ago, right? It seems like it was so different, but we have a record of it. Our parents might have been born then. You know, we know people who are alive from that time period. Like, you can still touch it and feel it. But we have this idea that, oh, today iPhones, back then, you know, they were just fucking dancing to Jimi Hendrix or whatever. It's like a whole different world. But it's like this exponential theory of time, though. When you look at history and the farther and farther back you go, the gaps of time become more and more scrunched together in our minds. Meaning, like, we look at the 1960s and 1990s as totally different eras right now, but we may just casually talk about 100 AD and 200 AD because it's way farther back and outside of our realm of thought.
Right.
We may look at that as, oh, that's basically the same thing. It's not. It's like it's fucking 5 generations apart. Right. Like, it's a totally different world, no?
Right. Yeah, no, and exactly. So, like we mentioned, 136 is the year that Valentinius is running for bishop. This is already a century plus,
after Christ.
A century after his death has gone by. Completely different world. None of them met Jesus. None of them know. So they're all like, they're like us. They're trying to figure out what happened.
That's pre-stock market crash in today's parlance.
Yeah.
Think about that.
And it's interesting because it's like, it would be like right now, we're 100 years after World War I now. And it's like right now, people starting to like add details to what happened during World War I. Imagine someone for the first time goes, oh, by the way, there was an alien recovered in World War I. And I know you never heard this yet, but I'm telling you, this is new evidence that we found.
Somewhere James Fox is like, what?
Yeah. And so that's kind of how Christian lore builds up over time. You get new things being added to the stories over time.
But it's everything. It's not just...
That's everything.
Like, it's literally everything, no matter what you believe or what ancient history you're looking at, whatever it is. It's like... It's always going to be imperfect because it's human beings doing it. They're doing it with their own beliefs and biases that are put into it, and they're doing it over a length of time. You were just talking about manuscripts written about the Josephus thing in fucking 500 AD or whatever.
Right.
I mean, Christ has been dead for almost 500 years at that point.
Right. And I talked to a lot of scholars who do textual criticism who are like big into manuscripts and, you know, comparing different manuscripts, and they say that after the medieval period kicks off, you get a lot of zealous scribes who want to fix things that. So, like, for example, the whole December 25th thing. Once that becomes part of the church tradition that December 25th is the birthday of Jesus, you get later scribes going back to older manuscripts and fixing the birthday of Jesus to be on December 25th. And they can tell because they can find other manuscripts that have the other dates on there.
Right.
So they go, oh, well, what's going on here? What's going on is there's scribes who are like, well, I want to make sure that these people get the right impression here, and they're going back and fixing manuscripts to sort of make things equal what's going on in their world. So that's another issue people have to deal with when you're examining manuscripts. You got to find out there's the possibility that what you're reading is an interpolation or some sort of like forged little area going on.
Do you think it's possible, and this applies to everything, not just Christianity, insert your religion here. Do you think it's possible that one of the religions actually is, on the whole, mostly right or has the right ideas, but we just live in a world where people felt like, as it was formulating over, you know, these early centuries, people felt like religion X needed to be 1,000% right, so they went back and personally like created an ivory tower around it to the point that now people are righteously questioning whether any of it's true because they feel like it's a cover-up in a way.
Yeah,
I think possible.
I think that's definitely possible. Yeah, and I think people always have this like innate drive to question what they're being told by authority.
Yes. So
when you have a church that's like steeped in authority and tradition of like bishops, and you know they pass it on to the next bishop, and people go, wait a minute, is this because are they telling me the truth here? The people want to question that, and I think that's how you get Protestantism and how you get different.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. What and we've been bringing it up a few times today, so maybe it's good to actually go through it. What was the Council of Nicaea to you, and what really happened there? There's all kinds of theories that come out of that, but I'd love to get your takes.
Well, a lot of times you'll hear people talk about the Council of Nicaea when the Bible was decided what the canon was, which is nonsense. There's nothing to do about the Bible canon in the Nicene Creed. The Nicene Creed was mostly about the Trinity, and I think there was an outlaw on um, castration, because there was a problem in Christianity. So people taking Jesus' words to the next level, right? One of the things Jesus says is, if your eye causes you to sin, pluck your eye out. If your right hand causes you to sin, cut your right hand off. All that stuff. Well, people were sinning because they were horny, so they were castrating themselves, not to do transitioning or anything like that, just so they can stop having the drive, so they wouldn't sin. Origen, one of the church fathers, Origen, castrated himself.
Oh my God.
So in the Nicene Creed, on top of the Trinity thing, there was an edict that no longer is this allowed in the church. No one, stop castrating yourselves. Like you guys are going way too far with this stuff. And so they straightened that. That was one of the things that happened in Nicene Creed. I think there was something about the Manichaeans that was mentioned in that creed, but it's been a while since I looked at it. But the Trinity was the big one. The major point of the Nicene Creed was that we're all clear that there's God the Father, and the Son and the Holy Spirit are all equal. They're all one. They're all three persons of the same Godhead. That needed to be clear going forward, because there was so much disagreement. There was monophysites. There were people who thought that Jesus was just the Son of God who's subordinate to the Father. The Father's the only God. Then there's the Arians who, and like I pointed out earlier, the Trinitarians get called Valentinians by their opponents as a diss, which is like, it's just funny because the Gnostic sects are still influencing the church all the way down to the Nicene Creed. They're still part of the conversation, going, these people believe in a Trinity. That's some Valentinian shit, man.
Right.
Like that's what Arius was saying in his letter to, I think his letter to Constantine. There's a letter from Arius that we have. I forgot who he wrote it to. I think it was to Constantine though. But yeah, we can look it up if you want.
Sure, let's do that.
Yeah.
And what made Constantine again want to do this and want to make Christianity the main religion of the Roman Empire?
So this is a hotly debated. This is not going to be figured out in one day. It's a letter from Arius.
Yeah, let's look at this before we forget.
Yeah, that's a good. Hold that thought.
Yeah.
Let me show you this for a second.
Yep.
Arus.
Constantine's Dear Arius letter, 333.
Yeah, but I think it's the one he writes to Constantine. Yeah.
There we go.
Arius, Confession of Arius.
His Confession
yeah,
of
that
Faith.
might be it.
All right, let's hit that.
Okay.
All right, so Arius, on being recalled, presents a recantation to the emperor and pretends to accept the Nicene Creed. They, having drawn up a declaration to the following effect, presented it to the emperor Arius and Ezoas, to our most religious and pious lord, the emperor Constantine. In accordance with the command of your devout piety, sovereign lord, we declare our faith and before God profess in writing that we and our adherents believe as follows. We believe in one God, the Father Almighty, the maker of heaven and earth. Oh, wait, no, that goes different. And in the Lord Jesus Christ, his Son, who has begotten him before all ages, God the Word, through whom all things were made, both those who are in the heavens. So basically, he's reciting the Nicene Creed.
Yeah.
Right here.
I'm trying to think. This is the one that he mentions the Valentinians.
You working with an iPhone 6 there?
Yeah.
Oh boy.
I
gotta get you upgraded, boy.
You know what? I know where it is now. I can find it right now. I sent it to someone recently. So just give me a second if you want to like clip this part.
Yeah,
out.
no.
So I do want. I think
this is interesting.
It'd be interesting for people to see this. Yeah.
I can comment on this for a second, just because.
Yeah.
I started to read that as I remember it, like from Catholic Church growing up.
Yeah.
But he's saying, so like, this is him reciting what's already been written to profess belief in that effectively.
Yeah, I think this is the next letter he wrote after the one that I'm talking about.
Okay.
So let me just see if I can find it in here.
One. It never ceases to amaze me, all the layers to
Yeah, so
the Bible and the
here
history.
We go. I think I found it. Okay, here we go. So this is from Arius's letter to Alexander of Alexandria. This is right around the time the Council of Nicaea is out there. He's fighting against it. He's a big opponent of the Trinitarians. That's why you have the Arians are named after Arius. Anyways, There's this long letter. Shall I read the whole thing or just read the
Yes,
part?
please.
Okay.
Yeah.
Our faith from our ancestors, which we have learned also from you, is this. We know one God, alone unbegotten, alone everlasting, alone without beginning, alone true, alone possessing immortality, alone wise, alone good, alone master, judge of all, manager, director, immutable and unchangeable, just and good, God of law, prophets, and New Testament, who begot an only begotten Son before eternal times, through whom he made the ages and everything. But he begot him, not in appearance, but in truth, having submitted him to his own will, an immutable and unchangeable perfect creature of God. And then he says, this is the important part. But not as one of the creatures, an offspring, but not as one of those born, nor as Valentinus decreed, that the offspring of the Father is an emanation, nor as Manes, this is another heretic, another Gnostic heretic, propounded, that the offspring of the Father is part of the same substance, nor Sibelius, who divides the monad and says Father and Son. Now, what is he saying here? He's saying this Trinity idea is bullshit. This is already heresy. We already been through this. Valentinus said this. We said he's a heretic, right? And they all agree on that. And same with this other guy, Manes and Sibelius. And these are all heretics. Why are we bringing this back up again? That was his argument against the Trinity. Now, he believed that Jesus was divine. But he just believed his idea was Jesus was divine and he's the Son of God and he was chosen in the beginning of the cosmos, but he's still subordinate to the Father. And the Trinitarians were like, no, they're all equal. They're all equal Godhead of the Trinity. And he said, no, that's Valentinian heresy, basically.
And so, to me, I don't want to oversimplify this, but this seems like typical of the times, just political infighting for power over who's right.
Absolutely.
It's not really more
Just
than that.
A bunch of ego tripping of people who think they're right. Yeah.
And that's the thing.
Battling it out. That's how Christianity develops. It's just debates for centuries.
Yeah.
You have councils all the way to 1400s.
That's the unfortunate thing with anything, something that's supposed to be great too, like religion, whatever it might be. It helps you get peace, explain your meaning of life. Most of the people I know who are religious use it for good, which is awesome. But then it's just human nature. You're always going to get powerful people who see a vacuum at the top and, then they're going to fight to the death. I don't mean that literally, but, to get their idea to be right because somehow it's going to give them more pull and more ability to tell other people what to do. And I think that's so unfortunate because it also doesn't mean that some of the ideas being debated aren't legitimate or it can't get to truth. It's just like when you get people in the middle of them, it muddies it up.
Right. And it's funny because if we go back to the Gospels themselves, what does Jesus say about the Trinity? Nothing. There's no
Never said anything.
Never says anything about a Trinity. The word Trinity is not even in the Gospels.
Right. But did he ever say obviously he referred to his Father and God
he's always talking about
that.
But he's always making it clear that he's subordinate to the Father.
Had he ever said anything related to or similar on parallel with the term Holy Spirit though?
John.
Yeah.
That's in John's Gospel. So I agree with the Christians. There's a lot of critical scholars who think that even John's Gospel doesn't have a Trinity. I disagree with that. I think John's Gospel does have a clear triad going on between God, the Father, and the Son, and then this idea of the Holy Spirit, which is mentioned in John's Gospel. John talks about the one who's going to come, and a lot of people reinterpret it. He's talking about himself coming back. He doesn't say it that way, though. He says, the one who comes after me, which is the Holy Spirit. He says that in the text. So in John's Gospel, you do have three persons happening. You have God the Father, God the Son, and this other figure called the Holy Spirit that's unnamed. So yeah, I agree with the Christians that the Trinity is based on in Gospels.
It just was never called that.
Yeah, a lot of critical scholars will say it was just never called the Trinity, and the way the Trinity develops in the Nicene Creed is different than what is in John. Fair enough. It does get developed. It takes 3 centuries to develop this idea.
I could see that both ways because I see what you're saying, like the fact that they developed it 3 centuries later and put them all together. But I could also see it from that perspective of like, well, maybe it really is a puzzle, and these are actually the three things that Jesus really wanted to refer to, and he just never said it that way, or at least we don't have a record of him saying it that way. And also, this is where you can get into the semantics argument of what did he really say ever. We can get the themes maybe, and maybe that is true, but when they're written in different ways in all four Gospels, and then the Gospels that, we'll talk about that aren't even, considered a part of the main Gospels that were also written, it's like, maybe the messaging is there, but the exact terminology isn't, and that's up to your interpretation. And so are these people interpreting it how they want to interpret it?
Yeah, I think that's what's going on. I think after a period of time, after you get to like the middle of the 2nd century, there's no one left who even remembers the 1st century anymore. And there were different people, different political situation. Everything's different. And I'm sure the tides go with what's more popular.
Yes.
And whatever one's more popular wins out. And so those extreme groups like the Carpocratians who are like, sell all your property, that's not going to win out. People don't want to do that. People want something more simple. Just have faith, just come to church and, get a communion, get a Eucharist. Simple. Yeah. That's what people want. People like rituals. People like going to church and seeing rituals play out. They're Romans. I love that stuff. So I can see for me, it's very clear why Orthodox Catholicism wins out. It's very simple. It's oriented towards the masses, towards the average person, just to show up and become part of the church. That's it. That's all they really want.
Let's go back to that question I put a pin in.
Yeah.
Where I was asking about what made Constantine basically decide, what? I want to make Christianity the main religion of the Holy Roman Empire.
So it's interesting because it's actually Theodosius after Constantine who completely makes all the other cults illegal except for Christianity, and Judaism is still illegal. Actually, the Jews get more rights than the pagans do under Theodosius.
The pagans that they used to follow.
Yeah, pagans that used to be in charge of everything are now out the door, completely gone.
Unless he thought that was funny.
Yeah. But no, it's true. Like they got taken out of their power situation, and now they're nobodies. Now they're completely illegal. They actually were getting persecuted. Pagans were. But Constantine tried to go for a different, he had a different attitude where Christians just got off of being persecuted, 313 AD. They're just getting a year or two off of the persecutions being lifted in 311.
Why were they lifted?
Well, Diocletian was no longer alive. Diocletian dies.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't popular. People just didn't like they didn't want to persecute people. No one wants to do that stuff. It just wasn't, they didn't want to enforce it anymore. And they just wanted to lift it. It just naturally got lifted. It played its course.
Okay.
And Constantine's mother was a Christian. So that might have been a big influence on her. She's the empress, basically. She's in his ear telling him, not only do I want to lift this ban, but let's give them funding. Let's get them legalized, which is what happens. Yeah. But what I actually think is really going on, funding. I think there's a lot more, I think there's something way more clear that people aren't looking at. And it's when we look at the political situation of the 310s, 320s, Persia is becoming more and more dominant in the Eastern realms. So they're starting to take over Armenia. They're fighting over Antioch, Syria, which is the eastern capital of the Roman Empire.
Yes,
Rome needs that. That's a big port city. It's a huge trading hub.
Also, huge Christian
city. There. Right. Yeah. So, what's a good way to get that city in your
Christians?
Legalize the Christians. So, and there's a lot of Christians in Armenia. And there's a lot of Christians in Antioch, Syria at that time, which is it's odd that Constantine's dealing with the Persians right at the same time when he's legalizing Christianity, which gives him more of a foothold in Antioch, Syria, and in Armenia, the places that he's trying to keep as part of the Roman Empire, which he successfully does. Constantine did a good job of maintaining those borders during his reign. He did a very good job, actually. And I think part of that was the Christians were fighting in his armies. because in the Eastern legions are full of Christians and full of Arabs, full of all types of people from that part of the world, Armenians, whoever, and a lot of them are Christians. So they're fighting in your army already. So why we should give them more credibility. So he legalizes Christianity, gives them funding. Constantine himself built 3 churches during his reign. But he's an odd character because it doesn't seem like he's a very devout Christian. He doesn't know much about the letters that he's writing about Christianity. He calls Jesus the second God. So like he's getting a lingo all mixed up. It sounds like he's just learning about Christianity for the first time. That's what I'm saying.
Some of it felt like, oh, we need new wallpaper. Put it up.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm oversimplifying that, but
and then his ark, the famous Constantine's ark, arch of Constantine.
Someone will hit you on that.
Yeah, someone's gonna say it's this. But the artwork on that thing, there's nothing Christian about it. There's no crosses on it. There's no Jesus on it. There's no Mary on it. It's just it's like soldiers, and then there's like the 4 winds, which is very pagan.
Thank you guys for checking out this clip. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe and hit the like button on this video. It is a huge, huge help. And if you'd like to check out this clip's full podcast episode, that link is in the description below or right here. And finally, you can follow me on Instagram and X by using the links in my description below.